Hello everybody and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys throw all sorts of Disney questions my way, whether it's about the parks or the movies or the history, and I try to answer them to the best of my ability. As always, we're wandering around MC Magic, the recreation of Disney World in Minecraft, and I've got a bunch of great questions in front of me, and I'm doing a new thing where I used to see all of them at once, and so I'd pick and choose whichever I felt like, but now it's just one after the other, so I kind of know what's coming up, but I don't fully know. So we're just going to dive right in with the first question, and it comes from DMAC, who asks, what are your must-sees and must-dos when you visit Walt Disney World? I thought this one was relevant because I'm going to be down there next month, and so I'm starting to think about what my must-sees and must-dos are. And the funny thing is, when I thought about it, I realized I don't know if I have many must-sees and must-dos. Like, I like the idea of every Disney trip being a little bit different, and the reason I say that is because Christine and I were talking about it, and this trip coming up, we've talked about how we both want to do a lot of things that we haven't done either ever at Disney or in a really, really long time. Like, I haven't been on Journey into Imagination in at least 10 years. That's one ride that I always seem to miss and pass by. So I want to make an effort to go there. I want to go to the American Pavilion in Epcot and go do the show there because I don't think I've ever done that before. So for me, that stuff takes priority over like a Spaceship Earth, which is my favorite ride at Disney right now, and I would guess you could consider it a must-do. I think it's also, a lot of my must-dos are easy to do, especially you go in sometime like September where there's some less crowds. I find myself less in a position where I have to make sure I do it. Like, I'm just going to naturally do it anyway. But I guess if you want like a simpler answer there, I would say Spaceship Earth is a must-do for me, and Space Mountain. Anything in Tomorrowland and Future World. Those two areas are must-dos for me. I'm wondering, for you guys, what are your must-dos? Or maybe it's different. Maybe it's like what we're trying to do this trip, where it's like we just change it up every time. Let me know in the comments below. And while you think about that, let's jump on to the next question. And the next question comes from Drummer Master, who says, what would you think of a Hershey's Chocolate World in downtown Disney? They're all over the world, including New York. If you don't know what they are, they're huge Hershey's chocolate shops. Also, what would you think about a prehistoric fair area, the prehistoric fair area in Dinoland USA, becoming a land theme to the new Disney movie, The Friendly Dinosaur? Isn't it The Good Dinosaur? The Pixar one, not sure if that's the right name. I think it's The Good Dinosaur. So 2 questions. As for the second one, I think that might be a great idea. I mean, we've got to see the movie, see if it's a good movie. I have a lot of faith in Pixar to make good movies, but you never know until it's out. But definitely, I'm all 100% for re-theming Dinoland USA. I think that whole area, I love Dinosaur as a ride, but that area just needs a whole revamp. I just don't really like it the way it is right now. As for your first question, that would be interesting because Hershey has a theme. Well, yeah, they have a theme park, I guess you could call it. I don't know where it is on the line between theme park and amusement park, but they have a park in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So that might be a little bit of conflict of interest there. But I know what you're talking about. It's these big, they're almost like, I call them tourist stores. I'm in New York City and I see them all the time in Midtown. They've sort of sprung up in the Times Square area, the M&M store and things like that, where it's like one specialty. I don't know. I wouldn't be, I think I'd be really neutral about something like that. I don't think I would be opposed to it, but at the same time, I'm okay with a world where we're getting less and less of like the tourist stores, as I call them. So I don't know. I think the park in Pennsylvania would prevent that from happening anyway, just because they could be seen as competitors, although I think it's a stretch to call Hershey, Pennsylvania a competitor to Disney World. Interesting question, though. Our next question comes from Nat Dancer, who says, do you think that they should put the World of Color show from Disney's California Adventure in Walt Disney World thanks to Have a Magical Day? Nope, I don't. I'm actually a big proponent of putting unique things in each of these parks so that they all have something valuable for them that you can't get anywhere else. And I think we're in an era where that's happening more and more. You know, back in the 60s, the idea, you know, you have to remember at that point, airfare and traveling, flying around was not, it was around, but it wasn't as popular as it is today. It wasn't as simple. Today, you know, there are people who will just go buy I mean, it's not super common, but they'll just buy a plane ticket and they'll fly somewhere. They'll just do it. And flying a family on a vacation, that's a lot more common today than it was back then. And so it sort of made sense back in that era when they were like, carbon copying Pirates of the Caribbean or the Haunted Mansion or rides like that so that they were on both coasts, because it was not very feasible or realistic to imagine that the average family in California would take a trip to Florida. Today, I think it's a lot more realistic. It's still not super accessible, but I think it is to the point where Disney can get away with putting unique things in the parks and saying, well, look, if you want to experience World of Color, now you just got to make sure you plan a Disneyland trip one day. And I'm all for that, just because I think that, on top of the ability, even if you can't make it out there, there's so many ways to experience it now, whether it's on YouTube or Periscope. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was watching a parade in Disneyland on Periscope because somebody was just there live streaming it. And it's not the same experience, I get that, but because of all these things added up together, I'm not a big fan of the idea of just copying things from one park to the other. I want to see some variety. And there is no short supply of creative ideas out there. It's not like, you know, one park gets all the good ideas and there's just going to be no ideas left for the others. But that's a great question. Next question comes from Nathan Hughes. And Nathan asks, as we all know, the monorail is a form of transportation between the Magic Kingdom and the deluxe resorts. The monorail looks like a vehicle from the future and fits well into a futuristic theme. My question is, do you think the monorail making stops at resorts like the Polynesian and the Grand Floridian is a breach of the hotel's theme? I thought this was an interesting question because I think it does approach a line where Disney's all about theming, and it's important to be about theming. And I love that they approach it very seriously, where everything has a story, and what you do needs to line up with that story, or else why is it there? And that sort of storytelling is what I think sets Disney apart from so many of the other parks out there. But on the other hand, like, what's the solution for something like this? If this is the case, if we settle that, yeah, it's weird seeing this futuristic monorail outside of a Polynesian resort, what do we do? You can't, I mean, we don't have the technology or capabilities to just change the theme of the ride vehicle as it goes through. That would be kind of awesome. Oh man, what if you could do that? Like the car, like the fiber body of the monorail was like a screen, and so the texture pattern changed. Maybe you do something like that. That would be kind of crazy. Probably also expensive and impractical. But what do? Do you just not have the monorail run to those just to keep the theme? I think that would sort of hurt the appeal of those hotels and the appeal of Disney as a resort. Or do you try and find this one magical monorail design that fits all of them, which I just think is impossible because they're so distinct. I think you have to draw the line where it's like there's a realistic line where they're just not going to be able to do it. Function needs to take over form, and I think this is one of those cases. And you can argue, you know what, the Polynesian's themed the way it is, but the monorail technically is like outside the Polynesian. You know, it's not like the Contemporary where it runs through the hotel. It's right outside. Grand Floridian, right outside. And I think the Grand Floridian, it kind of works. It doesn't look old school, even though it's funny you talk about the monorail and futuristic, but the monorail as a ride vehicle is a really old design. I mean, it's from before the Disney days, but I think it aesthetically fits in there, so I think it's okay. I think that's one of those things where we just have to accept that technology doesn't allow it to be all encompassing when it comes to theme, unless that magic screen on the monorail body idea that I just thought of is a real thing or possible in any way whatsoever. Projection mapping, maybe when it pulls into the monorail station, it projects sort of like they project on the castle. It projects like bamboo pattern on the monorail. So at least in the station, it looks sort of Polynesian themed. Maybe. I don't think it would work during the day though. Let's move on to our next question, which is from Gaming Empire, who asks, have you ever been on a ride anywhere that got stuck? Man, it made me think back, and I don't think I ever have. I don't think I've been lucky enough. Well, lucky or unlucky, depending on how you want to think about it. In something like Space Mountain, I think it's lucky because they turn on the lights and you get to see something you don't see every day. Other times, maybe not so lucky. I mean, I think outside of like them stopping the ride to let somebody with a handicap on, I don't think I've ever been stuck at a ride. And I think I will knock on wood and just take that as a blessing, because your time at Disney is always limited no matter how long you're there for, and I wouldn't want to like lose any of it to like a ride malfunction. But if anybody's got a cool like I was stuck on a ride story, throw it in the comments below, because I always love reading those. It's always interesting to see a break from the magic. All right, our next question comes from Bfish Alex Imagineering, and the question is, with all of the original content in Shanghai. This is sort of related to the other question. All the original content in Shanghai Disney, do you think that Disney should include some of these attractions into their American counterparts? I love the classic Disney attractions, but I would be ecstatic if some form of these ideas came to Walt Disney World to expand the parks. Do you think that Disney should have used those ideas and expanded on some existing parks before creating another? Also, what Shanghai attractions would you like to see in Disney and where? Tron, obviously, I mentioned the Tron thing. It's a tough line to walk, right? Because these parks are always evolving. And so if you want to go with the logic that, well, let's expand and work on these current parks before we do another one, you could theoretically get stuck forever because there will always be something to improve on. By the time you open a new area, an older area got just old enough that maybe that needs a refurbishment. So you do have to reach a point where you go, no, we need to start something new and we need to just work on that and keep working on this. At the same time, whenever the question I get asked very often is, what would a fifth gate in Disney World be like? I always say I don't want a fifth gate. I think there's enough work on those parks. I think the difference there is I don't think we need a fifth gate in Disney World. If they wanted to build a fifth gate, as in a new park, somewhere else in the world, like Shanghai, I'm all for that because that allows more people around the world to go to Disney and enjoy Disney. As for ideas, I think they spread them out. Maybe, we're not going to get a Tron coaster in Disney World anytime soon because Shanghai's getting it. But you know what? We're going to get a lot of cool Star Wars stuff, I'm sure. And, there's, of course, the rumors of Disneyland and Marvel, which will be my next thing. It's not a question, but it's a point I wanted to talk about. I can't believe I waited this long to talk about it. So I think it's just a matter of they spreading all these ideas out. It'd be interesting to see how they decide which part gets what, but, like I said, I don't want to see too many copies of stuff. I'd rather just see everything have its own thing. So before we move on to the next question, obviously there's a piece of news that's been going around. There's been a lot of rumors of a third park in Disneyland over on the West Coast because Disney recently purchased 3 tracts of land. I think it amounted to about 14.5 acres for an estimated value of $60 million. They try to buy up land around there whenever they can. And so a lot of rumors started, since those tracts of lands were, I believe, next to each other or really close, there was a rumor like, are they going to build a new park? Unfortunately, no, that's not the case. Disney actually came out and said that it's going to be for infrastructure. It's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. That said, the speculation is if they can move a lot of infrastructure over to this new tract of land, that'll free up some space in the other parks so that they can expand and do new attractions. And of course, the two properties that everyone's been talking about recently when it comes to the parks is Marvel and Star Wars. Are we going to see Marvel stuff? Are we going to see Star Wars stuff? My personal opinion, this is not based on any news, this is just my guess, would be that you'd see more of a focus on Marvel, and then Star Wars would be more exclusive to Walt Disney World. And the reason for that being that you can't put any Marvel rides in Disney World. They have this agreement with Universal east of the Mississippi. They can't do the Marvel stuff they want to do. So, West Coast, that would be a great thing to stand out and take some competition away from Universal over in California, is to just do Marvel attractions. And they can do them if they want to. It's up to them. So I think we might see Marvel stuff there if we see anything at all. And then I think that would allow them to focus more on Star Wars on the East Coast. And as a Star Wars fan, more than a Marvel fan, that makes me perfectly happy. But we're going to have to see. I think another important thing to keep in mind is that everything moves very slowly. They just bought this land. If it really is for infrastructure, like they say, then they're going to have to build up that infrastructure and then move everything over and then clear out what was there. And then, this is a sort of project that, you're talking years. So, who knows? We may not hear anything for another year or so. We're just going to have to keep our ears open. And in fact, I think one of our future questions sort of touches upon this. Our next question comes from Nicolette Tumazas. I'm sorry. I'm bad with names. Hey Rob, what do you think of Toy Story Mania getting another track and Soaring getting another theater in Walt Disney World? I saw it in the Disney Files magazine and understood the fact that they were the most popular. Besides these two attractions, what other ride would you pick to condense the wait time? Thanks and have a magical day. Interesting question, because it's a toss-up. On one hand, that's smart. They understand what everybody wants to go see, and they're giving them more of it. On the other hand, if lines are a problem, I feel like another solution would have just been to do a new attraction ride or, a new crowd pleaser that would pull people off of those lines. And Part of me wants to think that the ideal solution would always be build a new ride that's even better. But realistically speaking, you know, it could be a space issue, it could be an infrastructure issue, a budget issue. It might be a lot easier to just, you know, add another track to Toy Story Mania than finding a spot for a new ride. Although, I think that one specifically could be attributed to the fact that Disney Hollywood Studios kind of could be considered a half-day park now with so many things closing, and it's going to be so many years before we see all the Star Wars stuff that is most likely going to come to Disney, the Hollywood Studios. So that might just be like, you know, a stopgap for people inevitably crowding around that attraction more. Soarin', I was always lukewarm on Soarin'. I think it was a fun ride, but like, maybe they've got the space and it's a lot easier and quicker than building a brand new attraction somewhere else. So I'm okay with it. If I need to pick a ride that would condense wait times for, man, you know, here's the thing. I don't mind lines. But I guess if I had to pick one, it would have to be something like an Astro Orbiter, which sounds like a really weird request, but for me, you think of Haunted Mansion or Space Mountain or any of these, you know, Expedition Everest, they all have such fantastic queues that I don't mind being in them and taking in the detail and exploring that space. Astro Orbiter, you're sort of just like on a line and you go up an elevator, and it's not a very exciting queue, so anything to reduce that line, I'm all for it. So there's my answer, Astro Orbiter. I'm wondering what you guys are thinking for shortening it. Anyway, our next question comes from Copycat705, and this is actually the question I was thinking of. Has Disney been slowing down with their construction as of late? It took them 3 years to build the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, yet it took them 3 years to build all of Epcot Center. While Seven Dwarfs Mine Train is great and all, I feel like that it shows Disney construction timeline has been slowed down more. So how do you feel about all of this? I don't think that there's like an actual answer, like a clarification where it's like, well, this is the one reason. I think it's a combination of things. I think, for one, you're talking about Epcot, which when they built all of Epcot, nobody was there because it was a brand new park, right? Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, they were building in a space that was in the center or near the center of an open and functioning theme park. And that causes a lot of issues when it just comes to noise levels and timelines and just how to work around the fact that you have a live crowd there. Then, and not to mention that this is a company like Disney that really wants to try and maintain as much of an illusion of magic as possible. On top of that, you have a time difference. You know, this was the 80s to now. Technology, I think, has increased the complexity of everything we do so much, and that's great for the final, you know, attraction, but I think that also adds to how long it takes to do something. I would imagine that from a complexity level, something like Spaceship Earth, for as big as it was probably less complex than something like Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, from a ride mechanic standpoint, from a detailing standpoint, and then that added bonus of like they had nobody around them that they could just do what they want. And then I think third, it's a budgetary thing. You know, we think of Epcot, they, you know, Disney has this weird history of picking an opening date and sticking to it, and that got them in some hot water a few times where they really had to pull out all of the stops and pay a lot of money to hit that date. And Epcot was an example. They were opening on in October that year, and they were going to do it no matter what. They would, no cost mattered. Whatever it cost, they had to get it done. And from a budget standpoint, from like this public company now that's not run by the Disneys, it's like the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train doesn't need that treatment, right? We don't need the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train right away, so they can take their time if it's going to be cheaper. And they, you know, as they pointed out in a lot of books about the construction of Walt Disney World, this was a big problem for Disney because a lot of the construction companies would more or less hold them hostage. They would say, well, listen, your opening day is, you know, this day in 71. You got to get it done by this time. So you know what? We're going to charge you double for overtime, or we're going to slow down and then need to do more overtime to get paid more. They knew Disney was so committed to these dates that, you know, they'd do whatever they had to do, and that was not beneficial for Disney. So I think they probably have more of an approach these days where it's like, look, we'll get it done, but we're going to do it the right way, and we're going to do it in a way that's beneficial to us. And it's a long-winded answer, but I think it's a combination of a lot of those things. And then, you know, just not to say that Disney was never safe in the past, but I think as time goes on, we learn more and more about safety concerns and making sure everything's as safe as possible, and that certainly adds to the process as well. And then we have 8 Symmetry 8 who asks, Which is weirder, McDonald's sponsoring dinosaurs or Haynes sponsoring Rock and Roller Coaster? Here's the thing, McDonald's sponsoring dinosaur. Because my joke was always Haynes sponsors Rock and Roller Coaster because by the time you get off of it, you need new underpants. But McDonald's and dinosaur, I don't fully get it. I think it's those are weird in general, right? Because you don't think that what does McDonald's have to do with dinosaur? You usually think of something where it's like Chevrolet and Test Track. Makes sense. Cars. It's a car company. It just matches up. But at the end of the day, I think it's almost like reverse association, where it's not a matter of they want you to think of McDonald's when you're on dinosaur. They want when you're thinking of Disney, they want you to think of their brand. And so that's why I think you see companies like McDonald's who will grab whatever is available, like dinosaur. Or Haynes and Rock and Roller Coaster. Anyway, that's the Q&A. Another fantastic batch of questions. If you have a question that you would like to have answered, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Feel free to also leave it on Twitter. I'm at RobPlays. I'm also going to start trying to do more of these live, and the live ones are really cool because after I'm done recording, we sort of keep doing a Q&A. So, you know, it's sort of like an extended Q&A if that's what you want to check out, and you get the questions back and forth live. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Have a great week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you all next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.